Stony from Breadwinner.
Thank you. So I'm going to try to focus on everything, but I was given strict instructions not to stand here like this, because then the video says I look funny. I do live in London, but I am from New Jersey, which always leads to some really strange questions from Americans who know that I'm in London saying, you don't sound English. And I'm like, no, I'm from the New Jersey, not even the old one. But when I'm talking to those customers, we're usually talking about how they can integrate Salesforce and finance. So we will talk about all sorts of finance packages. And invariably, the CRM is Salesforce, but it applies across so much. So I want to talk today about what it's like to either have that goal, have that challenge, and what the impact can be to your company. And I just pushed the wrong button. Let's try that again. There we go. So I wondered, this is also very much something I'm curious about. This is what we hear from our customers. But we find that finance is being given demands that you might not have been given 20 years ago. Maybe if you were at a very large company 20 years ago, yes, but if you're at a small company, finance has often been more reactive. What happened last month? Prepare the finance accounts, prepare the management accounts for what happened the last year, give that to other teams, and they will make some decisions upon that. And all of a sudden, finance is being asked, actually, we need you to help drive growth. You need to turn yourself into a profit center. Have people found those demands are increasing? I'm seeing some nodding, so yeah. And you're like, oh, okay. I thought my job was to look at the money. I guess my job is to drive it all of a sudden. So that's one of the business changes that's coming through, or rather, I should say, even the social change of what your fellow managers are asking of you. Something else that hasn't been true 10, 15 years ago is that you have globally available CRM and finance systems. So 20 years ago, certainly SAP was everywhere, but there was no CRM used globally, and there certainly was no finance package. Finance packages have always been very often country-specific because of all the tax and regulation around that. So now we're seeing all of a sudden everyone can be using the same finance package regardless of what country you're living in. And the last thing, this is more the technological change we see, is that these finance packages and CRM, of course, are on the cloud, which means they've got open APIs, and people are coming along saying, we can integrate this. We can do things we could never do before. The scale of having it global makes it much more profitable and therefore desirable, and the third-party companies are coming along. So also I wanted to check about the speed at which you may have seen things. I only learned this 2 weeks ago when I was Googling. Anyone know that accounting came out of Venice? So yes, 500 odd years ago. When Salesforce launched, does everyone remember that Nokia candy bar phone? How many of you were amazed that you would just drop that thing and it would bounce? You didn't go to Apple and solve a $150 repair bill. That thing would go in puddles. Your hot chocolate, it happened to a friend of mine, it survived anything. So when Salesforce came out, that was the cutting edge of mobile technology. QuickBooks Online and Xero both launched before anyone had ever seen an iPhone. So for them, the idea of mobile was, it wasn't really important at the time. And they've done a great job catching up. Financial Force, amazing resources, couldn't see into the future, didn't know that the iPad would suddenly become a dominant tool used across the industry. In fact, one of the few things we've actually seen is Sage Live is one of the few companies that's been lucky enough to launch after the iPad and the tablet revolution have caught up. But they, on the other hand, are so recent, they're trying to build out everything else at the same time. So it's not easy to really find a finance solution that came about aware of all of the technology that was going to be out there. So you're kind of stuck in the middle as all of this acceleration is increasing. And what we're finding, and this is at least for the people who are talking to us, is that the integration is becoming a competitive advantage. I really struggled to word this in the negative, and it's maybe not as positive, but equally, if your finance and your sales are siloed, at a certain point this will become a liability for your company. And the surprising thing is the variety of companies we talk to, we keep on seeing the ways this is causing them pain, and there's no consistency. An inventory company will be very different from a subscription company, but there is pain occurring. So you're always getting, in any position, at any division of the company, at the end of the day, you're asked to save time and make more money. But the other thing that finance is being asked is really that growth, that scale. So we talk to companies and they'll say, actually, everything's working great today, but we'd like to triple our revenue in the next 12 months. We'd like to see if we can go 10x revenue in the next 3 years. And they say, we know our processes are going to fall over and die horribly somewhere between now and 10 times the volume. And we'd like to start preparing now. And that's what finance is often tasked with, is saying, okay, this is our growth. We need to be proactive and figure out where we're going to take our systems. Now, for this slide, you might be wondering, why didn't you have those cute little pictures? Has anyone tried to Google actionable as an image? It doesn't work. So I gave up the images on this one. But I wanted to talk about these words and what your perhaps sales teams and support teams are going to expect, unlike what you in finance are used to. Accuracy is pretty straightforward, but with accuracy, you've also got the reverse, and you want to be very careful that where are you going to allow, possibly if at all, the sales teams to start entering data into the finance system. This is something that nobody in finance ever wants to hear, is that we've granted read-write logins to the entire sales and SDR team. I see some horrified looks. Has that happened to you? You got that sentence? Okay, good. Oh, yes?
No,
Oh.
a few requirements that have requested it.
Yeah.
Decline admin. Yeah.
And what's also really interesting is that the sales team says, yeah, we want to write to finance. The finance. Yeah, no. So there's a little bit of challenge going on there. Visibility is also very different. When people ask finance a question, it's usually what happened last quarter, or compare these 2 years. Your sales and support team don't really care about that. They want to know, okay, Acme Inc., show me everything that's ever happened with Acme Inc., and perhaps, on average, how many days late do they pay their invoice? They don't care about any other company at that exact moment. They just want to see visibility into that one company. And they need that data to be actionable. And what I mean by that is it needs to be digestible in simple enough reports. So finance starts to think about, or finance wants to present this data to the sales and support team in a way that's very much company focused. These are the pitfalls. As you approach this, you want to be careful of loss of functionality. And there is no perfect solution. No matter what you pick, there will be some compromises you make. So identify what you're comfortable giving up. The reduced security is another one. You were told, yes, we want everyone to have, write access. That's not something we recommend. We're generally fairly proactive about saying it's okay if everyone in the company has read access to finance, or at least read access to finance on the accounts receivable data or the accounts payable data. You probably don't want everyone in your company to know how much money is in the bank. So, try to exclude anything on the balance sheet level. And of course, avoid implementation hell. Has anyone ever faced that? No, not me. So I also want to talk about the 3 ways you can approach this, and at a very high level. Does anyone have a Winnebago? This was not the slide you were expecting. Did anyone grow up and their parents had a Winnebago? Yes, and they were amazing. You could be cooking, you could even take a shower while driving. I'm really not too sure about the safety of this, but the idea of merging a car and a living room and a kitchen and a bathroom is possible. And this is out there. There are some incredible pros and some incredible cons of doing this, but Financial Force, Accounting Seat, and Sage Live have created this amazing thing where you have your accounting living on the Salesforce platform. There's no integration with another accounting platform. Your accounting, your double entry journals, I'm not the accountant here, are on Salesforce. Your ledger codes, everything's on Salesforce. So we talk to people about this. And what is always striking is what you can do that's amazing and the challenges you face by trying to shoehorn something in there. So this is the second of the 3 ways to approach it. I call this the camping trailer, and this is when you have an incredibly tight integration, but at the end of the day, the 2 systems are discrete. So there also allows some flexibility down the road if you ever need to change your accounting system or your CRM system, but this is a Salesforce conference, so we would never imagine that. Sorry, someone coughed in the audience. And so who uses this? We do. We're a breadwinner. Intact also uses this, and you can also achieve this with custom development. And what we usually see here, and this is both true for us and Intact, is that the accounting system is considered the system of record for all of the accounting data, and then it's replicated into Salesforce largely in a read-only manner. So any invoice, purchase order, bill, line items, payments, everything will be replicated back into Salesforce in a read-only manner. So you've got complete accessibility to view and report, but largely the security is taken care of, and there'll be some fairly difficult to, or not difficult, but fairly tightly controlled approaches to how you're going to get data from Salesforce into the accounting system. So Breadwinner does 0 in QuickBooks Online, Intact does Intact. If you have one system that's not among those 3, you'd have to head towards the custom development. And finally, the fleet of scooters approach. Oh, I reversed this image, not realizing that Just Eat. Well, imagine it's going the other way. These are badly spelled Just Eat scooters. There's a tremendous number of tools out there that can do this. And if you can imagine delivery scooters zipping around, the reason I use this image is that, scooters will go everywhere. Sometimes your delivery scooter will pick up from 2 or 3 restaurants before it goes to your house, and that restaurant can serve businesses and houses all with one scooter. So has anyone used Zapier? So it's a great tool if you're trying to save time. And so with Zapier or any of these systems, you can say, okay, the opportunity is closed won in Salesforce. At this moment, I need a note in Evernote to be created in my own Evernote. I need a MailChimp contact to be created and an email to go out from MailChimp. I need something to be triggered in my finance system. And if you have an intern there or some poor person who's having to just kind of manually, oh, okay, I'm having to copy and paste this data 8 times every single time something else happens, this solves that problem. The challenge around this is I often can't do full visibility because it's a triggered approach. It will never be able to do backups and reconciliation. You'll never be able to say, let me verify this data. But that said, this can be an amazing way to save time and do a lightweight initial integration between those 2 systems. So when people ask me what's the right system, the answer can depend on a tremendous amount of things. Company size is going to be dominant. To take Financial Force as an example, if you're 8 people, it's not common that Financial Force will be the right solution for an 8-person company. If you're 200-300 people, it might be one of the only solutions you'll be able to look at. So what's your business model? Are you dealing with inventory or manufacturing? That might lead you towards accounting seat. If you're doing software, subscription software, that might lead you towards something else. So your business model will play heavily in how you select this. Your legal and currency complexities, a lot of these will not allow for multi-currency and or multi-legal entity or even multiple accounting organizations. So make sure that's been sorted. Management structure is a surprising one, but we occasionally have conversations with people and say, well, do you want your sales and support teams to be able to see if someone's paid an invoice? We use this as a kind of a leading sales question when the answer is obviously yes, and sometimes they'll say, no, we actually don't want that. We only want finance and management to know that. Sales and support should not know really if someone's paid their invoice, or we see no competitive advantage for that. So depending on your management structure, how much you want this information to be distributed down, that's part of it. And also, does this word exist? I made it up for the slide. Am I the first one to coin this? 4th-party integrations. We as an integration are asked what other integrations we integrate with, such as Chargent. So one of the things to check is, what do I need my integration to integrate with? I think you're an English teacher in a former life. You're giving me a funny look at my 4th-party integrations. So this is my last slide coming up next. It's heavy on the text. You guys can read it over, but I also thought it would be a good way to see if we can lead into any questions you might have. See if this inspires anything. But does anybody have any questions on what I've just chatted about? Or if you're all thinking, when will the food come out? Not for a little bit longer, I'm afraid. Yes?
I think one of the things to maybe mention on the slide before, all of those points when considering finance packages are good ones, but also you might want to consider the cost of the package you're looking at.
They're in finance. They control the money. So, they can just add an extra line somewhere. But a good point. Thank you. Anyone else with any comments, suggestions? Tomatoes,
Does it matter what if they're e-commerce, what e-commerce packages following the transaction?
So
Multiple inputs?
we've seen people with e-commerce, and they often have real challenges because you often need to go sometimes from the e-commerce platform to Salesforce rather than the accounting platform. Because e-commerce, especially if it's heavily credit card based, the accounting package will only see, a large deposit today, which might have come from 230 different e-commerce transactions. And to try to bring that aggregated data back into Salesforce can be pretty tricky. And then we've also seen people who have an e-commerce platform where every discrete transaction with the name and everything is written into the accounting package. And then they turn around and say, well, we don't want all of those in our CRM. We only want wholesale in our CRM. So they will have in their finance package 10,000 names, of which they only care about 500. And then they often magically want you to exclude the other 9,500, which were retail, but there's often not a good metric of how to do that. So we've seen e-commerce have real challenges around this. If you're pure e-commerce, and especially if it's low value, you might not necessarily even use Salesforce. So the e-commerce we see is often that mixed model, and that can be really challenging. Okay, did I go under, over? I didn't even check my watch.
So you guys have a lot of experience with QuickBooks Online and Xero, right?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the two pros and cons of somebody using QuickBooks Online versus Xero or vice versa?
So if someone says to me, hey, what should I use? So I'll be a little bit agnostic at first. What your accountant already knows and uses is pretty important. Xero has really struggled to get ahead in the US market. I think the number of Xero installations is 5–10% of the QuickBooks Online installations. And likewise in the global market, I think that ratio holds. So what your accountant knows and is familiar with, and what every other accountant knows and familiar with, is also pretty important. And so yeah, if someone was in America, I'd say chances are QBO. And the other thing I would say is that I really haven't found anyone who chose the system that was so wrong for them, it was worth the switch cost. So in my experience, the switch cost is equally not worth it. Where you do get into some interesting things is some of the edge cases. QuickBooks Online is a lot better at understanding payments coming in that may not be directly connected to an invoice. So QuickBooks Online can just handle a payment against a customer record. It can also handle sales receipts, and it can handle invoices. Xero is pure invoice. You can always make an invoice and instantly pay it, but things like that may not be smooth. Xero, I think, has, however, better tracking. Xero will let you track every single line item in a purchase order, bill, invoice. I believe even the general ledger code, whereas QuickBooks Online, if you want to start tracking your line items, you can do that in the invoice, but not the bill. So on those edge cases, you will see some differences, and what's best for you, it would really depend on all your unique factors. But nothing is so dramatic that I would smack my head and say, how could you have done that? We personally use Xero internally. We know that best, but that's because at my last company, someone said, use Xero. And I was like, all right, and now I use Xero.
What about somebody who's outgrowing QuickBooks Enterprise, desktop? And what if their file is really large?
Yeah, I remember 15 years ago I was working with someone and they hit their limit of their QuickBooks desktop, and they had to have that awkward conversation with QuickBooks that said, yes, we have an undocumented limit of this many customers. Please quadruple your cost to us. That made them happy. I don't see any real advantage to staying with QuickBooks Online if you're leaving QuickBooks Desktop. You'll find some overlap, but I wouldn't say that the QuickBooks Desktop to QuickBooks Online is that beautiful of a continuity other than over anything else. And I don't think we've really seen any upper limits on Xero and QuickBooks Online. Once you start having more than 30,000, 40,000 invoices in your system, once you start getting more than 50,000 contacts, the APIs can struggle a little bit. And once you have more than 100 staff, I often would say that's probably the upper limit of what you can attempt to do with those two systems. Thank you, everyone.